Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Adriana Schneider, and I am the Professional Services Manager with AVAIL. And I'm joined by my colleague, Todd Terrasano, who is our Customer Success Manager, and will follow up with any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. I want to start out with some poll questions. Always really important for us to kind of understand who is in the audience, as well as, whether or not you currently own AVAIL. If you're using Revit today as your main design platform, and what you use to manage content that might not be stored as single Revit families, things like drafting views, system families, materials, etc. I'll leave that up for just a minute. Really nice to see. There are people here that are just learning about AVAIL. A lot of you guys are using Revit, but some that have some AutoCAD thrown in as well, and a nice variety of people in our audience. So thank you very much. Go ahead and end the poll. Okay, so today we're going to talk about graphical representation and where the value comes from and why. The reality is that we as humans communicated through visual symbols and signs a long time ago, about 73 million years ago. And with research, archaeologists recognized that all of those images were being drawn very purposefully. They were drawn to, create narratives for themselves or for those outside. And in the early 1800s, things became a little bit more permanent when a French inventor invented the first permanent photograph. And then shortly after that, in the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of changes that happened because it changed from a labor-based industry over to more of a technology-based industry. So there was a demand for print materials, and there was the ability to provide that. So it really expanded the demand for visual communication. We as humans, we're really wired to distinguish and process visual information a lot faster and a lot more effectively than text. We are basically a lot more evolved in our visual processing than our verbal process. We identify with patterns, shapes, and details. I mean, that's really why when we're little children, you start looking at exactly what that is. Shapes, what items are, animals, patterns, and we're much better at learning and remembering content than we've seen in pictures rather than text. That's something called picture superiority effect. So at the end of the day, visual communication in the right moment can really have a substantial impact on business performance. Really, 13 seconds is all you need to absorb an image. It's going to take a lot longer to find out what your friend was doing on vacation if you were reading her blog than if you were looking at pictures on Instagram. And in fact, we retain that knowledge better, about 42% better. So that really explains why social media is so photo oriented and it's so successful, because we can very quickly and easily find out exactly what's going on and then move on to that next thing. In fact, we've been doing this for a long time. Where's Waldo? Being able to find this one individual in a slew of colors and graphics and other people, it's a lot easier to pinpoint that than it is to find a specific word in a 30-page paper. The other part of that today is that millennials are the biggest generation in the workforce. They're also considered the first digital generation. I mean, let's think about it. They grew up with internet, cell phones, computers, and they use that within their own personal lives. So it really is an expectation that it's going to extend out to their working environment. And social media was built by millennials. Zuckerberg, obviously everybody knows him from Facebook, but then also Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger created Instagram. And both my generation, which is Generation X, millennials, as well as Gen Z, they actually find it really hard to engage when the content has absolutely no visual. So think about it. Scrolling through Instagram, you see a picture, you got to click on it to get more information. And then you got this headline, and then 3 pages worth of text. More often than not, people aren't going to read that. They're going to go back to Instagram instantly and continue to scroll. This is something that's continuous for us. It's daily occurrences for all of us within these generations. And the reality is the millennial, Gen Z, and Gen X generations continue to grow. And in 2028, they're going to become 58% of the workplace. So that digital environment is very important to grow within your organization. If businesses really did use visual communication effectively, there's research out there that shows that $1,200 of productivity could be unlocked each year for every affected employee, because 2 out of 3 employees, they carry out tasks better when they are communicated with visual versus non-visual medium. And they absorb that information faster than when it's an email or a document or something of that nature. And so we at AVAIL have tried to find ways to focus and emphasize on visual. We have a visual interface to easily find and use content. It's very workflow based, which we'll go into in just a minute, to kind of show you different ways that you can organize your AVAIL environment. And we're trying to be very, very flexible in our architecture so that we can accommodate the change in your workflow and adapt through the long term. When I first started here at AVAIL, I asked our founder and CEO if he could tell me in one sentence why he built it. And the reality is we currently live in a society of data, sometimes data overload. So there is a lot of data, especially with building information modeling, right, that is scattered all over. There's a lot of disconnected and loose data, and we need to hone all of that in. So AVAIL allows us to then manage, maintain, and update all of that data in one place to be able to share with our users and with others within our firm to be able to have the most accurate, up-to-date, and high-quality content that we need. So let's stop talking and take a look at AVAIL itself. So there's 3 things that I want to target today. I want to target the understanding of channel cards, what they are, how they're created, and how we have seen clients best organize them. Talk a little bit about key cards and that layering structure of how to find content. And then lastly, your thumbnails and being able to understand the best way to preview them, tools that you can use to make them of higher quality, and then just, some of the ways within AVAIL that you can improve on their clarity. So let's take a look at the channel cards themselves. With this new release, we have something called channel groups. What it allows us to do is bring that metadata and that initial search even further up front. So for example, you can go ahead and organize your channels by discipline. I can group them by architecture, electrical engineering, mechanical design. I can also organize them by market sector, having items based on, again, this is all workflow based, right? So maybe you have teams that focus on only healthcare, only retail, only university. We can expand this out to the marketing team. We can have images. We're not going to delve too much into this, but we can take a look at it if we have some extra time. So within the marketing group, so different images that people can use for their presentations, rendered images, projects, and even just marketing materials for branding, colors, schemes, and whatnot. Sometimes you have production staff that only focus on modeling content. Group your channels by modeling content. I also did some research on color and found that having a structure where the disciplines are of different colors help people differentiate and be able to find their content faster. On top of that, maybe you have production staff that only work on detail. All of that content can be at their fingertips immediately right away. Sometimes clients really want to be able to find their content from a project. Users really like to find their content through projects. But it doesn't always mean that that content has been vetted. It doesn't always mean that it's up to date or it's something that you should be using moving forward. So to be able to pull and index that content from a project, but only the stuff that should be able to be used. So for example, in my Appalachian project, I have my project and then I have different content that was harvested. For example, groups of sheep. Maybe these are roof details that people want to be able to use from one project to the next. It was decided during our post-mortem process. Wonderful. This particular sheet can now be added, but only these 6 sheets were ones that we wanted to use from this project moving forward. They were the ones that the BIM committee or the executive team found of high value. You can do the same thing with drafting views, with schedules. It doesn't really matter. You have the more senior BIM team will have the ability to define what the end users are able to use because they're only finding the content that has been vetted from that project and approved. So there's a lot of different ways that you can organize your channel card. Again, making it workflow based, not necessarily just Revit content. We need to stop thinking about AVAIL or just content management organization as its own file management storage. We're not looking in folders. For example, in my architectural modeling content, I have furniture. This furniture is the exact same furniture that I have within my interior design modeling content, because you can point to the same location of a particular entity or piece of content, no matter where it is, it can still be indexed within different channels. Within each one of those channels, you can still point to the exact same item. How did I create these channels? To be honest with you, this probably took me longer than anything else because, well, I really like to play with it. So, for example, I actually ended up using the design ideas after entering in architectural modeling content and exactly what type of content I was going to have within my channel. And I utilized the design ideas to then be able to change the graphical representation of that channel card. From there, you can make changes to colors and things like that, and then export it out or save it as individual images to be able to add to your channel card. It's a very easy and straightforward way to be able to create your channels. And here, this again is where you're managing and maintaining all of it or updating and then moving it over to or utilizing it for your AVAIL environment. What if we started looking at key cards? What's the value of key cards? Well, there's a lot of different, there is different value within key cards. It helps organize items or content in particular categories or groups based again on workflow and how your users are going to search for their content. And how do you want them to actually see it? I've talked with a lot of clients. Some of them like this grid view, or within our key card editor, we can actually change that view from a grid view to a banner or ribbon view. Change our edges. If I click on publish here, you'll be able to see that this is now updated and all of my key cards are located here at the top within a banner area. So I can double click into the casework here and start looking at my content. You can have this within different layers so that all of this is up front. For example, I'm looking for casework. Now I'm down to 89 results. I know that I need a base cabinet. We're down to 43 results. And from here, I'll type in 4 because I need a 4-drawer cabinet. And now we're down to 4 results. So I was able to use a combination of contextual search as well as visual search to be able to find the content that I need. Key cards just give an extra layer of organization. Within that key card editor, I'm defining the flow of my key cards on the left-hand side here. So any tag key or any key that you have tags for, you have the ability to define as a key card. In addition to that, these particular images are based on the fact that there are key cards associated to these images in other channels. So it'll automatically populate these key cards with those images as well. The last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about are the thumbnails themselves. So I'm currently actually harvesting some content today. I'm in my market sector and I'm looking at healthcare. You'll be able to see that I have wall families, I have panels, I have balusters in here. I can start building on that with key cards. So again, going to my key card editor, adding a key of element type, file extension, and then being able to go in further. Not going to, but that's okay. And from there, I can actually see, I can actually enhance the way that these look. So for example, in my interiors content, you'll notice that these particular thumbnails are pretty much are very high resolution. And that was done by utilizing a tool called PIG, the Preview Image Generator by Iconic BIM. I was able to run PIG within Revit on my content, changing the image quality from what you see here on the left to what you see here on the right, improving the quality and improving the result in which your people will actually see. Another challenge that some clients may have is being able to see the same thumbnails no matter what user is using AVAIL. And I'm going to let Todd talk a little bit about virtualizing your thumbnail.
And I'll turn on my camera to do so. So I think it'll be maybe easier. I'll steal the screen share real quick and show from my end. Does that sound good? Okay, thanks. Okay, so just to talk through virtualizing thumbnails and how you can do so, and some of the benefits of being able to virtualize your content. As Adriana pointed out, you have the ability to use external tools, things like PIG, Preview Image Generator, which does a fantastic job of creating these nice high-res images in bulk. And then you can use those images that are output by something like PIG as custom thumbnails within AVAIL. once you've got custom thumbnails in place, or just in general, if you're, experiencing, slow loading thumbnails because the content's indexed from a cloud location, or because you're connected to a VPN or something like that, that's where you can virtualize your thumbnails, which means serve those thumbnails from the cloud rather than having to render them locally, so that you have a faster and more consistent viewing experience for everybody. So just to give you an example, I'll pop open this, hospital bed and show you the large preview image of that. Now this was, this one's pretty decent in terms of a generic Revit thumbnail, but it can really be improved with like, using Pig or something like that. So what AVAIL does by default for thumbnails is actually just use the thumbnail provided to us by that application, right? So this is technically from Windows, right? So Revit gives this thumbnail to Windows, and that's what we get by default. So it's okay, but it's a little grainy. Whereas something like the bed shaker family here that we have is high resolution, and that's because we're using that custom thumbnail, and we can virtualize it. So what I'll do here is I'll right click and I can go to manage thumbnails and then say virtualize this thumbnail. And this little blurb will give you a quick explanation of what it's going to do. But in short, it's actually extracting that thumbnail and now serving that from just the thumbnail from the cloud instead of pulling it from Windows. So now what I'll do is I'll right click and I'll say open location and pop over here to my Windows File Explorer. And what you can see here is that I've got the family here, and this is the default thumbnail that we were seeing, like with the hospital bed. But next to it, I've got a custom image. So the bed shaker, and I've just got that as a PNG or JPEG in the same location with the same name. AVAIL will automatically associate that as your custom thumbnail. So that's why we see this nice high-res one instead. You can see for the hospital bed, the names don't exactly match, right? It's got bed hospital 1. So if I rename that so that they do match and come back and refresh, you can see now that it's automatically adopted that custom thumbnail. Now, because I've virtualized this thumbnail, I could actually go back in and delete or remove this image. I'm just going to rename it so that they no longer match. And then I'll refresh. And you'll see I still get that high resolution preview image. That's because it's virtualized. Again, it's not pulling it locally. It's pulling this, that's being served from the cloud here. So you can do that like I did individually here. I can say manage and virtualize, but also up here in the top right, I can go up to more options, and I could virtualize a whole channel in one fell swoop by selecting it from up here. Or I could remove a virtualized thumbnail if I wanted to. So just to show you the effect of that, if I come in and I remove this virtualized thumbnail and then refresh, because that custom thumbnail no longer matches, it goes back to the original kind of grainy one that we have here. So that's a quick rundown of how to use it and some of the benefits, but I really encourage you to check that out and try it out if you want to ensure faster thumbnails often, especially if people are like working from home, and or just consistent so that everybody sees the same thing. This way it's not like relying on their local machine to pull the thumbnail. The last note I'll make here is that when you harvest content like Adriana had done, those thumbnails are automatically virtualized in that process. So that's just already taken care of and done, which is really helpful. So I think that covers it. If there's any questions on that, please let me know, because I know I ran through the steps there pretty quick. So
that was.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Okay. So we're almost at the end of our presentation. The only other thing I wanted to show when it comes to the thumbnails and the content that you have If I take a look at my architectural details, which as Todd mentioned, are when they're harvested, they're already virtualized. So they are that high-end, high-quality, high-resolution image. And that is really so that within our preview, we can take a look at this content in a more detailed fashion if need to, especially when you have project managers or those maybe that don't necessarily need to work within Revit, but do need to evaluate what is going into your construction documents, and be able to make comments or inquiries. So there is this preview image for every single one of the thumbnails for people to be able to see them in a larger aspect. So the last thing here is simply a thank you. We are going to be hosting webinars every month, approximately most every month, at the last Wednesday of every month. Our next one is going to be on October 25th. Each one of them is going to be the exact same time. The next one is really going to be just a high-level overview and demonstration of AVAIL itself, how AVAIL works, how it integrates with the tools that you're currently using. As we kind of mentioned, it's not just necessarily a Revit content management solution. There are other tools that you can incorporate. And then how you can use AVAIL to improve operational efficiency and reduce risk. If you want additional information, please feel free to reach out to us. I don't know if there are any questions, Todd, or
not so far, but if you have any, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A or chat. And yeah, if you haven't started to leverage channel cards or key cards, it can really make a big difference in terms of the end user experience. So that's just my little 2 cents there. We did have a question come in just now. So once your thumbnail is virtualized, how easy is it to revise the thumbnails? Great question. Once it's virtualized, it's as easy as, let's say you put in a new custom thumbnail, or that file has been updated in a way that would change the appearance of the thumbnail. You just need to hit the virtualize button again, and it'll update that virtualized thumbnail. So just run virtualize thumbnail again, and it'll update it. Yep, great question. And that, I should mention that too, because that's a common one for harvested content. Is, there's certain elements that are very challenging or to get a good thumbnail produced for, or don't appear whatsoever. I'm thinking of like stairs, railings, detail groups, some other kind of random items that Revit just doesn't throw us a bone whatsoever through the API and provide us with a way to get a good thumbnail. So what a lot of customers have done is like, oh, cool, well, I can still provide a good thumbnail by putting in a custom thumbnail. And then they do, and it doesn't change. It's because it's already virtualized. But if you just run virtualized thumbnail on that element again, it'll work for harvested elements as well. It'll pick up that custom thumbnail and use that instead. So that's a helpful way to either give a visual where there isn't one provided, or to, I've even seen, like I've had customers do that for wall types, for walls. They wanted to, in the preview, provide a little bit more information than just the image. And they ended up creating custom thumbnails and virtualizing those. So there's a bunch of cool use cases for that.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Well, if there aren't any additional questions, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was short, sweet, and to the point. Come back next month for the AVAIL overview and demonstration, and there will be a survey at the end asking how things went and what additional topics you might want to learn more about. And we always take those into consideration. So please feel free to kind of let us know what your thoughts are, and what you'd like to see moving forward. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.